We're interviewing Jim Pivarnik today as part of ACSM's Distinguished Leaders in Sports Medicine and Exercise Science series. We're at the annual meeting in Denver, and Jim, welcome.
Thank you.
And thanks for taking time
Sure.
to visit
My
with
pleasure.
us. I just wanted to start out a little bit with your early career, your early background, where you went to high school, college.
Wow.
What did you major in?
Sure.
Were you involved in sports? Those type of things, and then we'll move on to talk a little bit more about ACSM.
Okay. Well, my father was a career Air Force officer. So I went to 3 high schools in 3 states,
Okay.
Alabama, Massachusetts, and Indiana. He retired when I was at Indiana, so I went there as a freshman. Got my undergraduate degree there in recreation administration.
Now this is Indiana University?
Correct, in Bloomington, Indiana.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then after that, I moved to Virginia.
What was the time period?
That was, my freshman year was '69.
Okay.
So
Okay.
tumultuous times on campus,
Yeah.
if you remember.
Yes.
So yeah, a lot going on. And recreation administration, I worked at a ski resort in Virginia from there, and James Madison. It was actually called Madison College
I've
at the
heard of
time
it,
when I
yeah.
started. Men had only started to go there in '73, I believe, and I got there around '73, but entered it in '75 in the master's program.
Wow.
And it changed to James Madison University overnight during my master's.
So you were highly popular on campus.
That's right. That's right. So I got my Master's of Science in Physical Education there at James Madison.
Did you specialize in anything? Or
Not too much at that particular point
just
in time.
an MS, which
MS,
is what I did.
right,
Yeah, a little
yeah.
of this, little of that.
A little of that, right. But I was more interested in exercise physiology than anything. I really wasn't a high school athlete. A couple of reasons. I was sort of small. I was a late bloomer in terms of size, plus we moved around.
Yeah.
I took up running when I got into martial arts when I was there, and then I took up running when I was at James Madison and got to know the track coach. So those were my glory days of running.
Yeah.
They weren't real. I wasn't a real runner, but I was a pretty good non-real runner.
Yeah.
At the
yeah,
time.
Yeah.
And got my master's there. And then I went back to Indiana for my Ph.D., which I got in exercise physiology.
Now, did you work with a certain lab there, or any key
Yes.
people? Or
I worked
what?
with Jim Wilkerson at Indiana University. He died a few years ago of cancer, but I worked with him. It was a 5-year program. It took me 5 years to finish. And I was into temperature regulations, body fluids, fluid shifts during exercise. Because of that, I did a postdoctoral fellowship at St. Louis University with a wonderful gentleman named Charlie Sine.
I thought you were going to say Hallozy, but
Yeah, no,
same
well,
place.
he was at Wash U,
Yeah.
and I went to St. Louis U
Oh,
for 2
okay.
years.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah,
Same
no,
city. but-
Right, certainly
Okay.
Know John and met him, and he's
Yeah.
a wonderful guy.
Okay.
So that was from '82 to '84.
Okay.
And I got my first real job, I guess, from an academic standpoint in the University of Houston. And then I spent 7 years there, moved to Baylor College of Medicine for 3 years
wow.
in pediatrics,
Uh-huh.
and then moved to Michigan State University in '94, and I've been there ever since.
So going back to your dissertation,
Mm-hmm.
has your research emphasis changed as you went along? or
It's
did
really
you-
funny. It has. I was interested in, as I told you, blood volume changes with exercise, fluid shifts, temperature regulation, heat acclimatization. And one day when I was at University of Houston, I got a visit from an obstetrician. This was in the mid-'80s. And he was interested in, he just wanted an exercise physiologist. And he was interested in high-risk women delivering. And he was looking at women with heart disease. And he was wondering if I could help him with some exercise protocols and that sort of thing. And I thought, from a model, an animal model, if you will, standpoint, when a woman becomes pregnant, her blood volume increases about 60% over the course of pregnancy. And then, as far as we know, goes back to where it was. And I said, well, what a neat model, so to speak, but nobody's looked at that during
Yeah.
exercise.
Wow.
So I took my blood volume expansion due to exercise concept to pregnancy, and the rest is history.
There
I've been
you
doing it
go.
ever since.
Yeah, when I think of your research, that's the first thing
Sure.
that comes to mind.
Absolutely.
So, wow, that's really pretty neat how
And the whole
something like that happens.
Right, and the whole field of exercise and pregnancy has changed so much because those were the days when we were still very, very nervous about women exercising.
Pregnancy. Yeah, during pregnancy.
Right, it was only the high-level ones that were exercising, and now we have guidelines that everybody should.
Yeah, it's commonplace
Right.
now. So in that same timeline, Jim, where did you first hear about ACSM?
Well, I heard about it during my master's, because that's when I really got into physical education and kinesiology. And for a graduation present, Rose Rummel, my wonderful woman, my master's advisor, gave me a one-year subscription, so to speak, one-year membership to ACSM, and she said, Jim, I think you'll like this organization.
What year was that?
That was 70, I graduated in 77. When I look back, it says 78 was my first year, official year of membership in ACSM.
Wow, that is neat.
That was a pretty good present.
Very nice, yeah. And then, so did you get involved in, what would it be, Southwest chapter then?
That would have been, what would it have been, Mid-Atlantic. But right after that, I moved to Indiana.
Oh, but yeah, right, because then
for my
then
PhD.
you went to Texas.
Right.
Okay, so yes, of course.
So,
okay. So you stuck with it there.
Right, so I did a couple Midwest meetings, but I never went to the annual meeting until 1980, when it was in Las Vegas. I believe Jim Skinner was the president, or maybe Jack Wilmore.
I would have to look at the list, too.
It was held at the Aladdin Hotel. It seemed like a huge meeting to me.
Yeah.
And I still tell people that was so exciting. It was like all my references of my papers were at the meeting.
They're alive.
And I still remember seeing Per Ostrand at a session, and I looked over there and I thought, well, what is he doing? Well, he's taking notes. He's just one of the guys. He's trying to learn about a session, even though he wrote the book.
And that was in 80?
That was in 80.
Yeah. Now, you didn't present a paper that year?
No, not till 82.
Wow, okay. So
that was my dissertation.
So was it in a session or a
Yes.
poster? Okay.
I believe it was a poster session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And then you went to Texas.
Went to, St. Louis for 2 years.
For your postdoc.
For my
that's
postdoc,
right.
and then Texas.
Did you do other presentations at ACSM then?
Yes.
After
I
the
pretty
first,
much, every year, it's pretty funny. 1983, I turned in an abstract, and those were the days when we were reviewing all of them. And my abstract that year was rejected. So I said, well, I'll fix them. I won't go to their meeting. So I did, and got over my temper tantrum and haven't missed one since.
And they didn't miss you, I bet, right?
Right.
No one said, where's Pivarnik?
Right. I talked to Mike Pollock, and he said, yeah, I didn't see you there.
That strategy's not good.
No, not a good one at all. It was a lesson learned. Go to the meeting anyway.
So you said you were in pediatrics? Or
when I was, right, because my research sort of crossed between pregnancy and also pediatrics when I was at Texas Children's Hospital.
Okay.
And obviously the tie is very close, and I sort of follow the continuum, the pregnant woman and then what happens to the offspring as well. So when you think of the lifespan, where does it start?
Yeah.
It could start in the womb as far as the development.
Right.
So it's an exciting area.
And so so were you in the medical school there? Or
for 3 years of Houston, I was at Baylor College of Medicine.
Okay.
So I ran a wellness center at Texas Children's Hospital, and I had an appointment in pediatrics and an appointment in OB-GYN. So I did a lot of my research with them.
Very neat, yeah.
But it was
perfect atmosphere.
It was. The medical center there, as you know, is fantastic.
Yeah.
But I got to the point of where I was I hate to say this, I was a very good administrator, and they wanted to make me even more of an administrator, and I thought, wait a minute, I went to school for research, and at that point in time, I had never had a Ph.D. student. We didn't have a Ph.D. program at the University of Houston.
I see.
And I thought, well, this is a great job. Houston's wonderful. I'm doing well. But I thought, if I ever get an opportunity to go maybe back to the Midwest, get with a Ph.D. program, I'd at least look at it. And then when Michigan State job opened in '94, I thought, this is perfect. So I've been there ever since.
And did you already know some of the faculty there in East Lansing?
I knew a couple of them. I didn't know them well. I knew a couple of them. The program had sort of ups and downs, and for many years, Henry Montoy was there, and Bill Huesner, Wayne Van Hust.
Yeah,
they were wonderful
big
people,
names, yeah.
but a lot of them had retired, so they were sort of in a transition phase. And so when I moved in, it was great because there was a lot to do. And I'm sort of a builder. I did the same sort of thing at Houston for a while.
Did they have space for you, a lab and that type of?
They had
did you
space.
sort of have to start?
We had space. We had a lot of space.
That's the good news, right?
No, the good news is we had the space. The bad news is we didn't have very much in it.
Right.
And right now we've finally built new labs, and it's very nice.
And
Great
so
place.
what department are you in now? What's the title? There's so many different
Right.
titles out there.
There are. I'm actually, half of my academic appointment is in kinesiology, and half of my academic appointment is actually in epidemiology.
Oh, great.
So when I went back to Michigan, well, when I started working at Michigan State, I went back and got a master's in epidemiology
I'll be
at
darned.
Michigan State.
Oh, you didn't tell me that.
No,
Oh,
no, a lot of my
that's good.
research works with
That's excellent.
epidemiology, and while I was getting the degree, every time I do a class assignment, I'd have a paper to write or
So are
something.
they in public health, or where's epidemiology
They're actually in
located?
the College of Human Medicine,
That's what it's called. Okay.
because we
so,
don't have a school of public health there.
Okay, so they're part of the medical,
Medical school, that's
okay.
correct.
And is nursing? do you
Nursing is
have
its own college.
how about pharmacy? Do you have that?
Pharmacology, we don't have pharmacy. We have pharmacology, which is
Pharmacology.
one of the basic programs for medical
In
school.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
the way ours is set
Sure.
up. Okay.
Sure.
That's perfect. Best
Sure.
of both
It
worlds.
is. It really is.
Now, don't you have some kind of a institute or something there?
Center for Physical Activity
yeah,
and Health.
Yeah. Now, are you the director of it?
Director
or-
of that.
Tell me a little bit about that. That's pretty neat.
It is, and it's the concept is one where we sort of try to triage, if you will, to try to get all of the research that we can be involved in, collaborations around campus with other investigators.
Nice.
Where do they go? It's a big, you think everybody knows each other, but you know, you're from a big
Ours
school.
is the same way.
There's people all over
Yeah.
campus, and
Yes.
you read what somebody's doing, and well, I didn't know they were doing
That
that. We do
happens.
that.
Yeah.
So the idea is to let people know who we are.
Very
So they
nice.
call us for collaborations, and it's worked very nicely.
What's it called again?
Center for Physical Activity and Health, CEPA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you start that?
I did in 2003.
All right.
Yeah.
And now, is that housed within kinesiology?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
And I have two colleagues. It's actually a departmental thing, but I have two colleagues in exercise physiology that are the prime people that work in it along with me, and of course our
Okay.
students.
Now, do you guys try to get grants
Sure
through
do.
that? And
Oh, yes.
How's that going? And what?
Well, it's going like
The
anywhere.
way every other grant's going,
Some,
right?
some are fine and some aren't, but that's certainly one of the purposes of the center. And as you know, a lot of the bigger grants, you need collaborative partners.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that helps sell the place
That's
if you have these sorts of collaborations
Good
going on.
point. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, do you do any of your pregnancy research through the center, or do you
Yes.
do that in a separate?
No, it's through the center in our labs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a very nice way to do it.
I remember the cover of ACSM's Health and Fitness
Right.
Journal was from your lab.
Correct.
One of a pregnant woman,
Right.
I think on a treadmill maybe.
She was one of my former students who's now at the University of Tennessee, and then the other woman in the picture is a former student who's at Appalachian State right now.
That
Yeah.
was very impressive because of the long-standing belief that
Sure.
you had mentioned. Well, wow, she's pregnant.
That's right.
She shouldn't be doing this.
You
know.
still hear that, and sometimes
Yeah.
you hear from the physicians in the medical community, which is unfortunate because women aren't getting the advice that they need.
Yeah, the
Still have to
correct
get the word
advice.
out. That's correct.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, you joined ACSM with this student membership. You
Right.
presented papers, and again, I probably can't remember exact dates, of course, but somewhere along the way, you became
Fellow.
a fellow.
Yes.
You got involved in committees.
Yes.
You became a trustee.
Yes.
You became president.
Right. How did
So,
all that happen?
How did that happen?
Well, I became a fellow in '86. I believe the meeting was in Indianapolis in '86. And I think it was easier to become a fellow back then. I don't know, because that was pretty quick. But I was on several committees, and then for whatever reason, there were a couple of years when I sort of had a dry spell, and I'd fill out my little thing for committees.
Oh,
and I
when you
wasn't.
volunteer.
Right.
Yeah.
So finally, I went to Angela Smith. I think she was the president at the time, and I said, "What did I do wrong? Did I offend you?" And she's just wonderful. And she's, "No, Jim." So at that meeting, I think that was the transition between Angela and Ed Howley. Might have been Baltimore 2001 or so. I remember Ed finding me at the meeting and saying, "Jim, would you like to run for trustee?"
Wow.
And to this day, I swear it's just so I'd stop bugging them about committees. So we'll run this guy for trustee, and he'll get slaughtered, and he'll go away.
And that'll be the end of it.
Well, I fooled him, and I won. And then I was just as surprised when I got a call, I think it was from Larry Kinney, 3 years later, who said, you know, you're one of my top choices to run for vice president.
Wow.
And
And that's what, basic and What was
Basic
that?
and applied.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
And I thought, well, if somebody thinks I'm worthy, I'm certainly going to give it my best. I always have.
Wow.
And then, it's funny, I was sitting at a board meeting as a VP, and been there obviously as a board member for a while, but you pay attention to your areas, but not the whole, at least me, the administrative structure and the hierarchy.
Right.
And I'm looking around the room and I'm seeing the second vice presidents that year all of a sudden are becoming the presidential candidates. And I'm not real quick, but eventually I get it, and I thought, wow, I might get a phone call in a couple of years if I don't mess up too badly.
Yeah.
And then it came from Carl Foster in 2007, I believe.
Okay.
And asked me to run for president,
and you won.
And I managed to win that. Yeah.
Wow, that's
been great.
Well, I also remember seeing video clips of you carrying the Olympic torch.
I picked a great year to be president.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did you run, in Michigan?
No, it was in Calgary. Well, it was outside of Calgary. It was for the Winter Olympics in 2010, and it was in a little town called Strathmore. And basically, they closed down the town. They literally closed down the Trans-Canadian Highway on the route that I was running. There were this was through our partnership with Coca-Cola.
Oh, okay.
And out of 12,000 runners, from what I understand, there were only 20 Americans, and those are the ones that Coca-Cola sponsored.
So the rest were Canadian?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And since ACSM was one of their corporate partners, they picked, and I was Mr. Corporate that year. I was president, and that was a thrill of a lifetime.
Yeah, I thought that was really, really pretty neat.
Yes.
Was it cold? Or
Actually,
when was that? I don't remember when it was.
It was January of 2010, about 3 weeks before the Olympics started. Well, cold is relative.
Yeah.
I live in Michigan, and sometimes January is very cold. And in that part of Canada, they have these Chinooks that move in there, and the wind blows, and it warms it up a bit.
Okay.
So actually, the day I ran, it was sunny. It was 41 degrees.
Oh, perfect.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
was
How long
beautiful.
did they have you run?
Well, it was supposed to be 300 meters. That everybody had a 300-meter leg.
Okay.
But they had an extra 100 meters to use, and they asked if I wouldn't mind running it. What a question. 300 meters or 400 meters, 400 miles, I'll do all of it.
I'm your guy.
Oh, I'm your guy. So I carried it 400 meters.
Neat.
It was wonderful.
Neat. Before we run out of time, one of the other quick things I wanted to talk to you about, or just because sort of the tenor of the times, is that you're the research integrity officer at Michigan State.
Certainly
and seems like we have to have this now.
We do.
As a historian, I'm thinking, well, don't people know this? Evidently not.
They don't. Yeah.
So I just wondered if you could comment, not specifics,
Sure.
but just in general,
Well,
about what's going on.
As you know, ever since some of the Tuskegee studies and the Belmont report that came out after that,
Yeah.
And human subjects in general, you have to worry about not only care of the human subjects, but actually any of us in science. When you follow the path of science and you read an article, you believe that's true.
Yes.
And then you do your research in that direction. Every time the news comes on and says, new study with caffeine and whatever might cause cancer. And these are life-saving or life-threatening issues.
Very important.
So this has to be correct. Well, every once in a while there's going to be somebody that's going to fudge it.
Yeah.
And if we don't police ourselves, the government will, and nobody wants that. So, and anybody that takes government money has to have somebody to sort of, if something happens, to be there and have procedures, and that's me at Michigan State. So it's not a lot of people, but when you have something that comes up, it's very intense and very unfortunate, and it's a tough situation.
Yeah, I think we have the same thing.
Sure.
And, like you said, every major university has to have it in place now. And
Yeah.
so do you deal with plagiarism too?
Plagiarism is a lot, some falsification, fabrication. Most of the issues are, I think, preventable, so we have a big education component as far as respect and communication is a lot of it.
Yeah.
Why didn't you tell me I wasn't going to be on that paper? Why didn't we make this decision up front on who's going to take what part? When two lab partners split, who gets the data? Those sorts of issues.
Very real life issues.
Yes, and they should be worked out up front. You can prevent a lot of
That's
these.
nice that there's a clearinghouse for
Yes, correct.
And also, before we run out of time, I wanted to pick back up with ACSM.
Sure.
And you were president-elect, you were past president.
That's right.
I wondered if you wanted to comment a little bit on ACSM itself and where it's been, where it's going, what you see, good news, bad news,
Right.
right things, wrong things,
Right.
sort of a global look.
Sure. Well, it's certainly grown since I've joined, but we've grown in so many ways, and our influence is so amazing now. You just come to the annual meeting and all the policy and all the science and the public health, which is the great news. Everybody knows ACSM.
Yeah, I agree.
And everybody respects ACSM, but the problem is trying to be, if not all things, most things to many, many people, there's always a tension. And generally it's a healthy tension, but you really have to keep on guard and make sure that all of the pillars, that everything we do fit with our pillars, and that every group has its place, feels good about being there, I think. And we do as much as we can as the organization for the particular groups and their particular passion. And that's difficult because, if not financially, just trying to keep all the balls juggling, it's difficult.
Yeah, I'll see how it goes today, but I've asked this question every year to everyone. And,
Sure.
and if I've heard one negative thing, it's sort of, well, maybe we're getting too big.
Right.
Maybe we can't do it all.
Yeah.
And it seems we keep taking on more
Right.
and more and more and more. And when's it going to
Yeah.
backfire?
Right. Well, I
And-
agree we can't do it all. I don't agree we're getting too big. I think
Yeah.
the larger your membership, the more people listen. But you're right. You have to target the things you're very, very good
Be
at.
selective. And,
Be selective.
yeah.
Exercises Medicine is a big hit. American Fitness Index is a big hit. We were born out of basic science. We need to do more things.
The concussion
Concussion
stuff, I
is great.
think, has
The
been a great
physicians
thing.
need to feel like this is a home for them. So there's a lot of areas, and we just need the champions in those areas to, number one, feel that whoever is sitting in the seat of president listens, cares about them, does all they can for them,
Yeah.
and then those champions are the ones that need to champion it. They're
Yeah.
the ones that know it.
Yeah.
I know my area maybe, but I don't know all the areas, and they have to do their part.
Yeah, any organization's only as good as its workers.
Absolutely.
You know, and
Absolutely.
from my standpoint, it's just been phenomenal.
Well, and
the leadership is
the leadership, and I can't say enough about the staff. They are.
yes, the core.
The job, you steer the boat, but the staff is just, if you're smart. My father was in the Air Force, and he was an officer, and he said the first thing he always did was find out who the Chief Master Sergeant or whoever of the operation was, and that's the guy that knew everything. I do that with the staff. I go to the building and I figure out the people that run the meetings or whoever it is. Right. I listen to them.
they're the
know
important ones.
They're the
right?
important ones. Yeah, they've been
Yeah.
doing it a long time and they're great at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, Jim, I told you the time would go very
It goes very
fast.
fast. It seems like 5 minutes.
I really appreciate
Certainly,
you
Jack.
taking the time,
Thank you.
and
Gladly.
I personally appreciate your support of the history
Well,
projects that we're doing.
history is incredibly important, and I like to spread this word to my students, and they need to appreciate where they've come from, where the organization and the whole academic area has come from, and this is a great way to do it.
And my bias is perspective.
Sure.
You know, we just didn't start
No,
here,
right.
and I think that's important. And I'm
Right.
glad you're on our committee.
Certainly. My
helping,
pleasure.
helping with this.
Sure.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay.